Here we go. So I know Jane. Obviously, she's a member of NCC. For how many years, Jane, have you been a member of the
Uh,
convention?
let's see, probably about 13, 14 years now. The year after I moved to Niantic, I became a member. It's been a while.
It's been a while. It's been a while. I'm glad you're here. And I've known you as just a caring person, a creative person. We do centering prayer together. And I'm always happy to see you, Jane, in whatever form or shape.
Thank you,
And
Stephanie.
I know that you are a retired marriage and family therapist, and you've had over 30 years of experience in a lot of different aspects of mental health care and also substance abuse treatment. I know you've treated couples, families, and individuals as well as those with major mental illness and addictions. I mean, you've done everything, Jane. You've worked in residential treatment. You've had 10 years of private practice, most recently at Synergy here in Niantic. And also, I didn't realize that you were a clinician in the military support program for 10 years, treating soldiers for depression and PTSD.
Mhm.
And that the last 5 years, you were an embedded clinician with the unit of the Connecticut Army National Guard. So thank you for including your military experience as well. And you're also an author of The Path to Real and Lasting Inner Peace, A Guide to Recovery for Anyone. And you're also, finally, last but not least, an artist hoping to do more exhibitions now that you're retired. And your website is innerpeace.works. So I'll be putting that up in the chat. We've got some other resources that I'll be putting in the chat for you all. And any of this information, as I've said, will be available to you and anyone who's watching this in the future, for your assistance and your support in a year when we've had overlapping crises and multiple external factors for stress. I think we've been challenged on every front, and I know that as a pastor, I've seen mental health become one of the most important issues affecting people right now. So I'm really glad that you've said yes, Jane. You've spent some time on this, and now I'm going to mute myself so you can get started. And so thank you for being here, Jane.
Oh, you're welcome, Stephanie. This is really kind of second nature to me, but I haven't done it in quite some time, but I'm grateful to have the opportunity to help. It is, it stands, I don't really have to tell you, but we all know that we're going through some unprecedented times with this pandemic for the last, what has it been, 7, 8 months? It's been quite a long time, and nothing like this has happened for 100 years. So very few of us who are alive can even remember a situation like this. But it's affected everyone, I mean, across the world, really, and pretty badly in this country, in so many different ways. Again, it's obvious, but I'm going to say them anyway. Loss of jobs. Many places could not stay open due to COVID public health restrictions. So people have been laid off. Businesses have closed. Small business owners have had to close their businesses. It actually makes me very sad to drive around Niantic and the surrounding area and see how many businesses are closed and wonder how many are going to be able to reopen when this is over. It's sad to look at. There's food insecurity going on across the country, probably more so in other states than here, but here too. Again, it saddens me to see food lines, hundreds of cars lined up in Texas and other states just to get food from the food pantry to feed the family. And I can't imagine, because I'm fortunate, I'm retired, at least I have some income. I retired just in time for the pandemic, but so many other people out there are trying to figure out how to feed their children. And I have been in the situation of, as a single parent, of not knowing how to feed my children for a while. And I can tell you that's downright terrifying. You don't care about yourself. It's just about how to take care of them. And with the loss of a job often comes the loss of identity. You know, what do I do with myself? Does my life have any purpose since I've lost my job? Loss of identity, loss of sense of purpose. Some people who still have jobs are able to work from home. Many people are just home with their kids when their kids cannot be in school. And I notice in the towns around here, sometimes it's open, sometimes it's closed, depending on whether they have cases. And so many people are trying to work from home while their kids are home, and it's next to impossible. And people are trying to work from home with their kids going back and forth from distance learning to school. And let's face it, not all of us are natural teachers. So distance learning is not easy for every parent. And the children, of course, are stressed too, the little ones, because their structure, their routine has changed. And you may think that your children are not affected by the stress you're going through, but that's not true. Children are very intuitive and very tuned in to their parents' stress. So be aware of how your kids are. Daycares are closed for the most part, except for the children of first responders. And parents are just trying to manage it all. It's like juggling all these balls in the air, and you have too many balls to catch. And I didn't even mention the obvious one, illness. Your own illness with COVID, or the illness of family or friends, and just the fear of getting COVID. So this is not by any means a complete list, but so many stressors that are affecting all of us right now that are outside the norm. And I've got to tell you that every night I say the same prayer, and my prayer is for everyone affected by COVID in all these different ways, because there are just a myriad of ways and everyone's situation is just a little different. So I pray for everyone affected by COVID every night. And with all these stressors that are on us right now, there come a lot of feelings. Obviously, sadness, because things have changed. We have been locked down for a period of time from our regular routine, not knowing if we'll be able to get back to it. Loneliness and isolation for lots of people. Anxiety about getting the disease, anxiety about other people potentially getting the disease, downright fear of the disease, and trauma. There's obviously, trauma is related to, what it means is that you've experienced a potentially near-death experience, like being in an auto accident or having a serious illness, or someone having a serious illness who could potentially have died. That's a trauma. And obviously losing someone this way unexpectedly is a trauma. So there's loss and grief going on. And the grief is not just about people's illness. It's about the ways that our lives have kind of closed up into our homes, and our routines have become smaller, and our days have become very limited compared to what we could do before. So I want to acknowledge that all of us are going through some of these feelings in one way or another. I want to mention the elderly, because many of them live alone and may have lost contact with their support system, may not be able to be with their family right now because their family may fear that they'll become ill. The family may fear that they may be carriers and infect their elderly parents. So that leaves them kind of alone, and they may or may not have a support system coming into the house to help them. And the main issues of being a senior citizen anyway are loneliness and isolation. And the solutions to those are friendship, connection, and support. So if there's any way that you can help your elderly friends or relatives become reconnected, call them, see how they are, check in on the people who live alone. And if they are not in contact with their support system, you might maybe help them do that. For example, the senior centers are closed, and many elderly people find their socialization at the senior center. Friendships are disconnected, except online. I mean, we do have Zoom, we do have a lot of FaceTime apps that we can use. If you're a person who has a computer and is not technically challenged, but many senior citizens don't. So they need to be contacted by phone. For young children, as I mentioned briefly, there's that loss of structure and routine that they get from school if they're out of school. And certainly their social skills, they're not developing their social skills as much when they're just with family. And for kids with learning challenges and disabilities, they really need the structure of the special help that they're getting at school, and they're not getting that right now. And parents, again, aren't necessarily equipped to be teachers. Some don't even have access to the internet. So children are struggling, and they're in tune to their parents' emotions. All kids, regardless of age, have some anxiety and confusion and sadness about what's going on. Teenagers, for example, being a teenager is all about your social relationships and figuring out your future and figuring out your identity. And friends and social events are extremely important in the development of teenagers, and many of them have not been able to have a graduation, a prom, a school trip. So there really isn't any closure on their school experience. So they may be feeling a lot of sadness about that they may or may not have expressed to you. It's a good idea to ask them if they haven't expressed to you how they're feeling about the changes to high school. And of course, for some, COVID has affected them personally, and they've struggled. Some recover quickly, some struggle for months to recover, some don't recover at all. And one of the ways that many people cope when they're faced with increased stress or illness is to use a substance. And the truth of the matter is that whether or not you have an addiction or family members have an addiction, drinking and use of other substances has increased during the pandemic in a way that's kind of concerning. And other addictive behaviors as well, not just substance abuse. They've all increased during the pandemic. And years ago when I was an intern, I was at a retreat with a bunch of students, and I had a particularly difficult time in the group that was going on for reasons that were personal to me. And after the group, I was kind of upset, and I went into the kitchen and I took a beer out of the refrigerator. And my professor, who was standing right next to me, said, "Don't self-medicate your pain. Don't self-medicate your pain." And I thought about that. I didn't see myself when I opened the refrigerator as trying to self-medicate my pain, but that's exactly what I was doing. Not that there's anything wrong with having a beer or a glass of wine if you don't have a substance problem, but if it's about pain, which it is, most of the time, particularly with people with addictions, deep down there is pain they're self-medicating about some kind or another. And the more you do it, the more it becomes your primary way of coping. And it doesn't work. When you sober up, you still have the problem. It doesn't work. We'll talk about other means of coping later, but I just wanted to say that. Another way that people are being affected, obviously, is the loss of friends and relatives to COVID. and the inability to process their grief the way they normally would by having wakes, get-togethers, funerals, burials. Someone I know lost his father in the middle of the pandemic in the spring and was unable to have a funeral for a long time. I don't know if he's been able to have a funeral now, but that would interfere with the process of grieving. And grieving is a normal process. I want to emphasize that. Grieving is not considered mental illness because everybody grieves. Everyone loses someone at one point or another. So it's a normal process that everyone goes through, and a universal process. If it hasn't happened to you yet, it'll happen to you sooner or later. And it's part of life. Birth and death are part of life. So if you're grieving, not just someone personally, but you can be grieving your situation. It doesn't have to be about a life and death loss. You can be grieving your job. You can be grieving your identity and your role that you've lost. You can be grieving separation from grandchildren or parents or grandparents. You can be grieving just the change that your life has taken. So all of that is a form of grief too. And I think that right now we're going through sort of a universal type of grief in society because we've all had some kind of loss, whether it's job related or money related or family related, illness related. And it's normal to feel sad in waves. It's normal to feel anxious. It's normal to feel lonely and to have guilt perhaps about the way things have happened and whether you could have done something differently. And it's normal to feel stress about loss of a job and too many home responsibilities interfering with your ability to do it. While we're talking about grief, I wanted to read you a poem. And I found this poem years ago. My son had been in an accident out in California, and he was in the hospital having a very risky surgery. And I went into the chapel to pray. And while I was in the chapel, I found this poem. It's untitled, but it was written by Dr. Chris Erdman of University Presbyterian Church in Fresno, California. I think you'll find it speaks to grief pretty well. When I run out of options, out of resources, out of time, out of health, out of hope, when I'm pressed up against a wall, no time for another doctor, no time for new pills, no time to find a new support group, no time to find a new religion. When I finally let go of all other options, I fall empty into your boundless love. I think that it just certainly is the way that I deal with grief. At the end of the day, God is there for me. Maybe not for everyone, but for me. So, having said that, I'm going to talk about what to watch out for in terms of symptoms in yourself or in others. You or someone you know may feel decreased or increased appetite, maybe eating more or less than usual, and might be experiencing weight gain or weight loss that's unusual. In addition, you want to watch for decreased energy and motivation. For example, someone saying, I really don't want to clean the house, and the house never gets cleaned, and the dishes don't get washed. Excessive guilt. I coulda, shoulda, woulda, and it must be my fault that I'm in this situation. Depressed people often feel excessive guilt and a lack of interest in things that normally would interest them. Not wanting to have fun, not wanting to be involved with other people. Isolation, not wanting to come out of the bedroom. Feelings of hopelessness, feelings of helplessness. There's nothing I can do. Nothing's ever going to get better. Those kinds of statements would indicate some form of depression. Excuse me, I need a drink of water. But when does it become serious? If you or the person you love has made statements like, I wish I were dead, you'd be better off without me, what's the point of living? Nothing will ever get better. I may as well kill myself. Those are all potentially dangerous statements because it indicates that the person is contemplating death. Acquiring a weapon when they've never had a weapon before might also be a symptom. And sometimes giving away things that are valuable to them can be a symptom that someone might be potentially ready to do themselves harm. Oh, if someone you know is making statements like this, never assume that they won't do it. You might think, well, they're doing it for attention, especially if it's a teenager. We often say, well, you know, they're doing it for attention. Well, that may be true, but what if you're wrong? You're always better off doing something about it than regretting the fact that you didn't do something about it. So when someone is making suicidal statements or statements that indicate that they might want to harm themselves, they need immediate psychiatric evaluation by a professional. I mean, friends can help and friends can be supportive, but they don't necessarily know what to do. And Stephanie, if you could put the list of phone numbers up in the chat box for me so people can see it. I didn't open my chat box. Here we go. Okay. First of all, you may want to take that person to the emergency room for evaluation. If they're unwilling to go, you can call 911 and tell them that it's a psychiatric emergency. Doesn't necessarily have to involve the police. There is also the National Association for Mental Illness, NAMI, is a wonderful resource. They deal with people with major mental illness, but they also come out in emergencies. The National Suicide Hotline, this one I'm going to read to make sure everyone sees it. It's 1-800-273-8255. I'm also going to mention Brian's Healing Hearts here in Niantic, because they're not an emergency clinic, but what they do is they help people who are survivors of suicide. And by survivors, I mean people who've been closely affected by a suicide personally, or people who've made an attempt and survived. You don't necessarily have to be the person who made the attempt. It can be the parent, the children, the spouse of. They all get support at Brian's Healing Hearts. There is a hotline for LGBTQ issues. Specifically, there's a hotline for substance abuse. SAMHSA is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health, not sure what the H stands for, but it's a national agency that can address both mental health and substance abuse issues in an emergency. Domestic violence hotline, National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-7233. And if the person is unable to call because the abuser is present or listening, you can text to talk to us at 67746. I think that's wonderful that you now can text to get help with domestic violence. There's also a veterans crisis hotline. I'm sure there are others, but that's a short list I put together that one or more of these may be useful to some of you. I also created a small list of resources. Maybe Stephanie, you want to put that up. Psychiatric and mental health resources. And again, it's not a complete list by any means. It's just some resources that I am aware of and I think are good. One of them is Yale Psychiatric Institute, if someone needs to go into the hospital. Natrog Hospital here in Eastern Connecticut, which does both substance abuse and mental health care. And the Institute of Living in Hartford. Both all of them excellent places. There are also some addiction resources I've listed, American Addiction Centers. They will actually come and pick someone up if they're having a substance abuse crisis and take them to rehab. They intervene immediately by phone. They are a little more expensive. Not everybody's insurance will cover them. For that reason, I also listed Connecticut Valley Hospital in Middletown because they take state insurance and you can get detox at Connecticut Valley Hospital. Mountainside, which I believe is up in Kent, is also a very good rehab. And I don't mean to necessarily imply that those are better than others. They're just ones I've had personal experience with that I would recommend. So, moving on from that, I'm not just going to talk about the problems, I'm going to talk about the solutions too. So how can we cope with the situation that we're all in now? I think the most important thing is self-care. You're no good to anybody else unless you take care of yourself. And we're all guilty of it at one time or another. Taking care of yourself, by taking care of yourself, you must acknowledge that you have a loss of control over the situation. You cannot fix everything. You cannot make everything better for everybody. You can't solve all problems. And you don't have to accomplish everything in terms of the schoolwork, in terms of the housework, in terms of your job at home. Don't feel that you have to do everything. Give yourself be easy on yourself and take care of yourself. Because again, you're no good to your children if you're not well. In fact, as marriage and family therapists, I can tell you that almost all problems with children have to do with difficulties the parents are having, that the children internalize emotions about. And there's 3 aspects of self-care that I want to talk about: the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. Physical self-care is pretty obvious. Getting exercise improves your endorphins, and endorphins are your feel-good hormones and make you feel better. Any form of exercise that you like, I don't care if you walk around the block, get out in the sunshine and walk, run, hike, walk the dog, or any other type of exercise that you enjoy. Exercise helps depression, and exercise helps anxiety. I used to work at a very high-stress, a number of high-stress jobs, but one in particular. And sometimes I would come home and I would be really stressed out and then have to deal with my children and dinner and all that. I had a mountain bike then, and I used to get on the mountain bike and ride around town about 5 miles and come back. And I can tell you, when I came back, I couldn't even remember what I was stressed out about. It really worked. So exercise is extremely important. Healthy eating. Again, it seems self-explanatory, but often when people are depressed or anxious, they eat junk food. They eat things that aren't good for them, that just happen to be there. They don't bother to cook. And those vitamins and minerals that you're not getting are important to how your body functions. Every single vitamin has a purpose in helping your body run properly. And so do all the minerals. So if you're not eating healthy, your body is not operating at its optimal level. What if you didn't put oil in your car? Would it run properly? It's something the car needs in order to run. And we need nutrients in order to be healthy. And your physical health and your mental health are very closely tied together. Another very important thing is getting enough sleep. And I know this has been a big problem for a lot of people. A lot of people I know personally have told me they're having sleep problems during the pandemic. It's often because of anxiety. We worry about, can we take care of our families? Where will our money come from? When will we be able to see friends again? And we have all these coulda, shoulda, wouldas running around in our head, and we can't go to sleep. And again, as I mentioned before, sleep problems are a part of depression as well. So a lot of things can be going on that could cause you not to be able to sleep. But the best antidote to a sleep problem is what we call sleep hygiene. And sleep hygiene is figuring out a routine where you gradually wind down what you're doing over the course of the evening. Lower the light, get off the screen time, get off the TV or the phone as soon as you can. And I know I've been guilty about that too. Sometimes I'm on it. But wind things down, quiet things down, lower the lights. If you have children, read them books instead of letting them watch TV. Sometimes those sound machines are very good for sleeping. They help people relax. The machines that have, the sound of waves, the sound of the wind or the rainforest, those are very relaxing and not very expensive either. And reading. Reading is wonderful for going to sleep because, especially if you're reading a novel, it takes you out of where you are and puts you somewhere else. And by worrying about what's going on, you are not going to change anything in the moment. If there are things you absolutely have to remember, write them down rather than let them run through your mind over and over again. Write them down on a pad on your bedside table, and you can deal with them tomorrow. And then you can just read, listen to a meditation tape. My personal favorite is audiobooks. I have read so many audiobooks since I've been retired. It's what I do with lots of spare time. But again, with sleep hygiene for children or for adults, the idea is to gradually wind down the routine as the evening goes on. I like to have chamomile tea. That's good for helping me sleep. Doesn't work for everybody, but it works for me. Melatonin is your natural sleep hormone, so there isn't any harm in taking a little melatonin. And if still after all these things you're unable to sleep, you certainly can consult your doctor and see whether your doctor has any other recommendations. That wouldn't be the first thing I would do. I would make sure you were trying to eliminate anything that could be interfering with your sleep first. Oh, and one more thing, excess caffeine. A lot of people don't think about that. Coffee, green tea has a lot of caffeine. Energy drinks have a lot of caffeine. If you're consuming anything with lots of caffeine, you have to determine when you need to stop drinking that in order to get enough sleep, in order to be able to sleep at night. One of my supervisors once solved a sleep problem in one session by telling the client to stop drinking coffee. Problem solved. So caffeine's a big culprit. So we talked about the physical aspects of self-care. Now I want to talk about the emotional aspects. Certainly trying to maintain social contacts with friends and family by phone, by Zoom, or any other kind of FaceTime that you might have access to. For the people who don't have access to the internet, you can call them. You can just check in and see how they are. It also helps our own mental health to find a sense of purpose given what's going on. Personally, I felt very drawn to feedingamerica.org. I wanted to make a donation to them because they're literally the people funding these food banks for these long lines of people all over the country. Helping other people, even in the smallest ways, is a good antidote to depression because it takes you for a while out of your own situation. I did mention checking on the elderly. As far as connecting with people virtually, there's Skype, Zoom, there's Duo, and any number of other video apps that are available. And I would encourage you to use them. A lot of people are uncomfortable with video apps, but I find it actually nicer to be able to see the person that I'm talking to as I'm having the discussion. I know they're not in the same place as me, but it makes it feel more personal to me. So if you haven't tried video apps, I would encourage you to try them. And remember, while you're connecting with people and hearing other people's struggles, that this situation is temporary. I know it's been most of 2020 that we've all been going through this, but the situation is temporary. The situation is going to subside. There are vaccines on the horizon quite imminently. And I do anticipate in 2021 that things are going to slowly improve. And I think that's realistic to think that way. So if we can just bear with the restrictions on our lives a little bit longer in the interest of public health and do the things that the public health experts are recommending and take the vaccines when they're available, I think we're going to see significant improvement in 2021. I'm no doctor, certainly not an epidemiologist, but it seems to me that things are getting better. There's hope. Oh, I forgot to mention, there are also apps you can use for anxiety. One of my friends swears by an app called Calm, C-A-L-M, and she listens to meditations and just to natural sounds and things on Calm. I know there are other ones too. I don't know the names of them off the top of my head, but if you just went into the Google Play Store or the Google Store, Google Play, and put in under apps, relaxing apps or apps for anxiety, a whole bunch of them will come up. So take care of your own emotional needs by connecting with people, finding your own support system, whether it be by Zoom or by meeting people at a distance, connecting with people how you can. And thirdly, our spiritual needs are an important part of self-care. Now, I realize that not everybody is spiritual, so I don't mean to imply that you have to be, but I do think that all of us are spiritually seeking in one way or another. Whether or not you have a religious faith, we're all spiritually seeking. It's just that some people seek it in the material world, and that's not where it is. That's not where you're going to find it. Spirituality is about looking for meaning. It's about finding the meaning in life, finding, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but meaning in life and connection with a power greater than yourself. And there are many ways to do that. Some people use meditation, and they like meditation apps. One of my favorite meditation apps, or just I use it as a calming app if I need to calm down, is called fragrantheart.com. It's free. And if you go on fragrantheart.com, there are meditations, guided meditations with or without music for all kinds of different problems, specific ones. You can find one for pregnancy, you can find them for loss and grief, whatever it is that you need to calm down from, there's a meditation there. Some people find that yoga is a very spiritual practice. I do some yoga myself, although I'm no expert. At Niantic Community Church, we have centering prayer, which is clearly, I mean, Stephanie could explain it better than I could, but a way of trying to be with God, making the effort to actually be with God in the present and let go of what might be interfering with that process. But as I said, not everyone is spiritual in a religious kind of way. Not everyone can seek spirituality in the ways I've mentioned. Some people find their higher power in the forest or on the beach or hiking to the top of the mountain or going out in the sunshine. I mean, how many people, you can't climb to the top of the mountain and look out on the horizon and not feel that there's something greater than yourself in this world. I had a client years ago who had survived the Holocaust. She was not Jewish. Her parents were Jewish sympathizers, and so she and her family had to hide out in an underground bunker. And all of her life, she couldn't even get in the shower. She was so afraid of being in a dark, damp place. She really had a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. But when we talked about spirituality, her spirituality was walking through the forest. That's what calmed her down. That's what made her feel connected to life, connected to the universe, connected to nature. So that worked for her. And it's whatever works for you. It does not have to be in the context of a religion. And while we're talking about self-care, I want to ask you a question, and you can think about it. Maybe you want to talk about it later. What brings you joy? What brings you joy? A lot of people would say, what are you talking about joy for in the middle of this miserable time? It's because deep down, there are always things that personally bring us joy. For me, it's when I'm painting or when I'm drawing, I think I feel the most joy. It's just something I like to do. For some people, it might be music. They really enjoy music. Some people have hobbies. Some people have pets, and they like to maybe acquire a new pet to take care of. A friend of mine who lives alone acquired a feral cat, and taking care of that cat gave her something to do and purpose in her life right now, and gave her companionship. Hobbies, photography, cooking. And another one I want to mention that you don't often think of is humor. It's okay, even though people are suffering, it's okay to watch a funny movie. It's okay to make other people laugh or have other people make you laugh. It doesn't mean you're not compassionate. Laughing is very, very healthy. It actually I don't know, I can't explain it, but there is a connection between laughing and actually relieving depression and anxiety. My other question to ponder is, what brings you peace? What brings you peace? And that can be many different things. It could be listening to a symphony. It could be laying in the sunshine. It could be many different things. But thinking about what brings you peace and what brings you joy personally, and doing those things just to take care of yourself will go a long way toward helping you cope in the situation that we're all in. And if all of the self-care you're doing still isn't helping, you're still having symptoms, or the person you care about is having symptoms, I want to talk about therapy. Most therapists these days, if not all, are doing their therapy online, and there are many different ways they're doing it. But teletherapy has become pretty much the norm. So people are available from the comfort of your home to talk to. And I know there are a lot of barriers to people engaging in therapy. The first one is probably shame and embarrassment. I should have been able to fix this myself. I know I'm a competent person. Why can't I solve this? But again, you don't need to be able to handle everything. It's okay to ask for help. If you've tried everything you know how to do and nothing has changed and you're not feeling better, or the person you love is not feeling better, that's when it's time to ask for help. I mean, therapists are the people you talk to when you're stuck, when you've used all your resources and you're stuck. It's like if you were driving your car and you got stuck in the mud and you couldn't get out, and you tried everything you could think of to get that car out of the mud. You could sit there and spin your wheels and insist on doing it yourself, or you could call a tow truck, right, to assist you. just to pull you out of the mud. And that's the way I often described it to clients. We're not here because you're an incompetent person. We're here to help you through the stuck period. And when you get through the stuck period, you may not even need therapy anymore. So it's okay to ask for help when you're stuck, because we all get stuck sometimes. And in addition to therapy, AA and NA and other addiction support meetings have, for the most part, gone online. So if you're struggling with a substance problem, you can access them from home, which is nice for some people, because I know it's very difficult, especially the first time, for someone to walk into a meeting. But I know a lot of people in recovery who are doing their recovery online right now and finding their support there. Excuse me, another drink. Finding a therapist. If you've never found a therapist before and you don't know anybody, obviously you can use your web browser to search. You can search on Google, Bing, Yahoo, AOL, whatever you use. You can put in therapist, psychologist, marriage and family therapist, counselor, and all kinds of names will come up. You can call them or you can read their biographies and see what you think of them. The magazine Psychology Today has a website, and on their main page are lots of therapist profiles, and you can read specifically what they do. Where they're located doesn't make as much difference these days because it's teletherapy. But if you'd like to continue beyond the time, beyond this pandemic time, you might want someone in your area. Obviously, I'm a little partial to the American Association of Family Therapists, Marriage and Family Therapists. It's AAMFT. On their website, they have a link called Therapist Locator that'll bring up all the marriage and family therapists in your area. The National Association for Social Work, NASW, also has a referral service on their website. You can certainly find a therapist by word of mouth, or your doctor might know of a good therapist that they refer to. You can also call your insurance company if you want to make sure that your insurance will cover a particular therapist. They can give you names that are in network with the insurance. So there are many ways to find help. And if you find yourself stuck or you find your loved one to be stuck, encourage them to ask, at least to talk to somebody on the phone and see how they feel about them. So at this point, for those who are participating by Zoom, we're going to have a question and answer time. And for those who've been watching virtually, I want to thank you for listening. I hope that some of what I said is helpful to you, and I want you to take what is useful from this discussion and use it for yourself. Thank you very much for listening.